Okay, well, this is the Jeremiah Gunn Show. I want to change the world, and I do know what to do. That was a beautiful, beautiful rendition there from days gone by. And so that's what I want to talk about here. I want to talk about how to change the world. Welcome to the Jeremiah Gunn Show. The Jeremiah Gunn Show.
The Jeremiah Gunn Experience. Study all day. Study
whole life. Podcast in the morning.
Hey, this is the Jeremiah Gunn Show.
Let me see if I can get that set right. I'm trying to do what is that called? A witness protection thing where I modulate the voice so that you can't tell where this is coming from. Oh, it's coming from behind enemy lines. It's part of the resistance, broadcasting to the resistance. And my wife was telling me about the news recently that, all of the devices of your social network are tracking you now. They're going to track you. They're going to track you. What I've been saying, it's 1984. I mean, what else is new? One time Google or one of those lords and dukes and barons up in Silicon Valley, they were working with China. They were going to try to help China. I think it was the one whose original mission statement was first, don't be evil. And they were going to help China take out words like freedom and liberty out of their search engines and things. They actually almost signed the contract. The sales guy had a booking and decided not to, I guess. I don't know. But we saw what happened with all of that. Twitter sphere and Dorsey and all that stuff. But they want to track you. So I think maybe I ought to do a voice recognition change so that they can't track me down. But if they want to, they can. And so we are living behind enemy lines in the Civil War that never ended. And it's, Charlie Kirk used to say, what time is it? Well, 1776, 1984, 1864, take your pick. So this is Jeremiah Gunn Show. I'm on broadcasting on CSN, the Common Sense Network, part of the ISI network. And this show is dedicated to Charlie Kirk, and therefore it's dedicated to truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This is your moment of truth. I have not heard anybody who gives you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I've been looking for it since the late 1900s. Don't see it. So if you want to be part of the resistance against our imperialist occupiers here behind enemy lines in the blue no matter who states of the Confederacy, the Democrat Party started the Confederacy, and now they want to keep it going. They want to rebel against the Constitution, and frankly, to hell with you if you happen to be a person that loves this country and lives under their regime. That'll be explained on other shows. Anyway, this show is about the poor, the poor middle class, the poor, and the misunderstanding that's going on right now. The twisted lies. What is a communist? What is a communist? You hear that word a lot. Young people are saying it's cool. It's cool to be a communist. It's cool to be a socialist. No problem. I know our fathers and our uncles and our grandfathers and fought against it, gave their lives. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Bernie was cool. Marxism was cool. Obama brought it in. So what is a communist? It's probably appropriate that we ask that. In about the 1830s or something, I didn't even know the word existed, but someone wrote a poem in England. What is a communist but one who is yearning for equal sharing of unequal earnings? Bumbler or idler or both. He is willing to fork out his copper and pocket your shilling. And that's the game. That's the game that's going on, right? Here's the problem. The word poor has been twisted. It's a lie. It's an upside down lie, and that has to do with the word adultery. Whenever you see a bizarre sort of cultic double standard, that'll indicate that you've got this sort of cultic, detrimental, demonic thing going on. Adultery means Adultery means, it's not an affair. Adultery means, in the good book, in the wisdom literature, it means taking two things that don't belong together, or more than two things, and putting them together. And in the wisdom literature, he tried to keep us from doing that. He talked about the mixed multitude, people that get married to people that have other gods, other belief systems. And so what happened is, you know something? I told that guy not to call me, and he calls me right during the... See what I'm talking about? Anyway, let me get back on track here. So, people are more interested in their own ideas than listening to yours. So I hope that's not you, but here's what we're going to talk about. So how did the adultery take place here? Christians, I'm doing that in air quotes, they enable the government, education, media attainment complex to pervert words like social gospel. And then the left cries separation of church and state. So it's always ironic, isn't it? So I talk about this idea of WTF whenever you're looking at a problem. And remember, the chief cause of problems is solutions. The chief cause of problems is solutions. So we're looking at this. I have this concept called WTF. Whenever you got a problem, whenever there's a problem presented, say to yourself, I'd suggest WTF, window, table, floor. Think of it as a PowerPoint slide, and it's got a picture of a window, a table, and a floor. One half is talking about, the left half is talking about, oh, it's a window, it's a window, it's a window. Don't you get it? And the other side's saying it's a table, it's a table, it's a table. You're the one that doesn't get it. And in reality, it's neither of those. It's the floor. Nobody's talking about the real problem. So the biggest, there was a guy named Jesus of Nazareth came along, kind of a fundamental, instrumental, watershed moment, iconic moment in history, tipping point, crisis, which is really just when things change, comes from the word cross. Boy, I had to check my alarms and things better. Super sorry. All right, so Jesus crossed paths with a lot of people who were considered sinners in his religious tradition, which was Judaism. And the only people that he had a problem with are the ones that put him to death, the Jews. No, it wasn't the Jews. It was the religious authorities. All of his posse were Jews. He was a Jew. His parents were Jews. So there's a little weird twist right there for you Nick Fuentes or whatever out there. You Nazis, it wasn't the Jews that killed Christ. It was the religious system. And so a Pharisee, when Jesus called them Pharisees, this kind of gets to this point about, you should be nicer. You should be nicer to people. Well, John the Baptizer was called by Jesus the greatest man born of a woman on earth. And he called them snakes when the Pharisees came. When the Pharisees, which were the religious authorities, when they came down to be baptized by him, he goes, hey, you brood of vipers. Jesus said they were like graves, painted white, look nice, but inside they're full of dead men's bones. And touching dead bodies was a bad thing in that Jewish culture, in that religious tradition. So he was kind of slamming them pretty hard. That's all he did. So what happened is they cooperated together in adultery, the Christians and the government, education, media attainment complex, and twisted what those words mean. Christianity, social gospel, poor, good works, do good deeds, charity, the word charity. The good book says it's the greatest. Faith, hope, charity, the greatest is charity. It means love shown in doing good works. So, you know, I'm just going to go through this kind of as fast as I can. Madison, who the father of our Constitution, all 5'4" of them, he said, and they should teach the Federalist Papers in high school. They really should. But he said that there's no place for charity. There's no place for charity in the legislature. Because what happened was somebody in Connecticut or something, they had a fire in their part of their town burned down, and the Congress was trying to get together money to help them. Makes sense, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. No, that's not the purpose of government. That's not the purpose of government. It's not meant to be a charity. And these same people that want to do all this stuff, what did we just find out with Doge? What did we find out about the UN and Doge and all that stuff? Is that they want to take money from you and do Christian deeds. Wait a minute. Separation of church and state. Is it secular government that is supposed to do good deeds and charity? And yet they say things like, oh, you're not your brother's keeper. What are they doing? They commanded that you take the 10 Commandments out of the schools, even though it's in the Supreme Court, etched onto the wall. So is it separation of church and state, or is it government does all the Christian duties in a false, phony way? The word Pharisee, and these are the only guys that Jesus had a problem with on planet Earth, the ones who killed him. He said, you're Pharisees, you're hypocrites. Hypocrites, that's the word that we're looking for. Phony, it means a phony. It's a Greek word that means to speak from, like hypodermic, speak from behind or under a mask. They used them in the theater, the popular Greek theater. You're a phony. You're playing a role. And that's what they do. That's what they do. They do it with other people's money. There used to be a thing in finance about use other people's money. They're virtue signaling. The Pharisees, Jesus called them out because what they would do is, you were supposed to, by the terms of religion, do good things for the poor, for the legitimate poor. And what would they do? He said they'd go out with a trumpet. They'd have somebody come out and say, time to give to the poor, so everybody could see them doing it. Jesus said, don't be like that. He said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. How often do we do that with charity? Even Christian or Judeo-Christian churches, how often do they do that with charity? Not even let their left hand know what their right hand's doing. They're doing it to be celebrated by man. They're virtue signaling. And they try to guilt trip us. They try to guilt trip us. It's just exactly like Lincoln told this story about about a stagecoach. This is the Democrat Party. This is the left. We don't even have to say the left and the Democrat Party and the communists and the socialists and the anarchists and the Islamists. We don't even have to say it anymore. Just say Democrats. All rolled into one now. They're proud of it. They're trying to figure out what to do about it because most America doesn't like that mix, that adultery, but that's what they do. Well, he told a story about this guy, stagecoach robber who robs a stagecoach, and he says, give me all your valuables or I'll kill you, and then you'll be guilty of murder. So they try to guilt trip you. This pop singer with a $14 million mansion and Kamala Harris, her new neighbor, says, I'm on stolen land. Okay, give it back. Don't guilt trip me into taking my money. Rob Reiner, living large, Bel Air, always was, always has been. Did he earn that money himself? Yeah, he made a bunch of movies after he did All in the Family. His dad got him in the business probably, but he did a good job. So what does he do? He takes our money to give it to some stupid thing that doesn't work, and he doesn't even feel obligated to find out whether it works or not. He just pats himself on the back and gets awards. Ted Turner famously gives $1 billion to the UN. To the UN? That was the Oil for Palaces program. Kofi Annan and his sons were skimming off the top, taking the money. They once described foreign aid as a transfer of money from poor people in rich countries to rich people in poor countries. Can anybody honestly say that's not true? What about Rachel Maddow? She make $20 million a year? She got a pay cut from $25 million to 20 or something for one show. One show. They cut her down to one show a week. I mean, how could she even do more than that? How could she? She's too busy going and collecting awards from the press on how wonderful she is. But she doesn't do anything except glare at the camera and mug and goon and do these goofy faces like her counterpart, her feminine version, Colbert. $15 million a year for 20 years, while the network is losing 40 to 60 million, and costing $100 million to put on that show with 200 people. You ever watch that show and ask yourself if it takes 200 people to put that on? So why would a network that's a private entity, why would they keep a tax write-off like that? What is he doing with that money? What kind of Christian is he? But he can feel good about himself. This is the beauty of it. Al Gore can save the world. That's the uniqueness in our period of our life. That's the uniqueness of it. They can take other people's money, like Ted Kennedy, this multimillionaire trust fund baby, and do things with your money, and then pat himself on the back about it. Al Gore, because I'm thinking, why do they do this? They have enough power. They have enough money. This is a way of using money from other people. That's always been a thing in finance, other people's money to grow your wealth. But they can use it and they can pat themselves. I'm the one who cares about the planet. I'm a grown-up Greta Thunberg. So I'm St. Al. I not only save the world from certain death through lying and lying and lying, but I get rewarded and awarded. Got a Nobel Prize, got a Grammy, an Oscar, right? I think Conan O'Brien or somebody said that was the highest grossing PowerPoint slideshow in history. She gets a Nobel Peace Prize, gets a Academy Award for a piece of crap that turned out to be nothing but lies, built on lies and nothing but lies. Somebody said a leftist is someone who feels a debt to their fellow man, which he proposes to pay off with your money. So why is it important for charity to be private, not government? Why is that important? I want to play a little clip. This is a caller from Seattle who called in, frankly, the greatest Bible teacher in the world, and asked him a question. And if you don't have any doubts about that, don't, but because I can prove it. He's not right about every single thing, but man, he's been teaching for almost 70 years or 60 years. He really started as a teenager, and he really, really works hard to know what it says and what it doesn't say. There's plenty of people who tell you what it doesn't say. Just go to a church on Sunday. They'll tell you emphatically what it doesn't say, and that's the problem. So just listen to this for a second. Let's see here.
And I enjoyed meeting you when you were here in the Seattle area back in the fall. Nice chatting with you. I wonder if you could give a few words on the matter of Christians and civics/government/politics, and specifically the church that is the family of God. How we ought to engage with one another using the scriptures and as the Holy Spirit moves to give us wisdom, using it as our guide. But it seems to me, especially, for example, in the place that I live in Seattle, there is so much suffering due to, I think, people completely disengaged from civic matters that it's actually really painful to watch. And yet, among my believing friends, it can be volatile, even to discuss patiently and in a mature fashion. It's almost like we're not accustomed in the body to discussing civic matters in a loving way. And I just wonder, what do the scriptures say? What's your experience? What would you have to say about that whole topic?
Well, I will say this, that if Christians cannot discuss differences of opinion about such things in a civil manner, that must be because there's not very many mature Christians around, because mature Christians don't fight with each other unnecessarily. Now, when we have differences of opinion, we should try to persuade each other. But, what Paul said, the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be patient toward all. He says in meekness, instructing those who are in opposition. That's, of course, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 25, 26, or 24 through 26. A mature Christian is going to be able to talk about differences of opinion without getting ugly about it. But I will say finding mature Christians in the church, in a modern church, sometimes is like looking for a needle in a haystack, because many modern churches are not functioning in such a way as to produce mature Christians. And the ones who may think they want to often think a mature Christian is one who's been fully indoctrinated in the theological positions of their denomination. I've actually heard pastors say that, we produce mature Christians by teaching them our doctrines. And yet a mature Christian is one who is mature in the fruit of the Spirit, especially love and patience and gentleness and so forth. So if you're finding that you can't find Christians who will discuss those things in a civil manner, that you're not dealing with mature Christians. They may think they are because they can cite all kinds of theological minutiae, but they're not really mature because they don't love. Now, about civic matters. Christians are concerned about civic matters because we're supposed to help the poor and so forth. Christians disagree sometimes about what the most wise and just way is to do so. Some people think, we should just take the money away from the rich people and give it to the poor. I don't mind giving money to the poor if that's going to help them. There are poor people who are poor not because no one gave them enough money, but because they don't know what to do with money when they get it, or they buy drugs, or they do crazy things. They just don't. A person can get rid of an infinite amount of money if they have life patterns that simply are giving the money like thrown into a hole. Likewise, we have to ask, is it just to take the money away from richer people? Who gave us the authority to do that? Isn't that what the Bible forbids, is stealing? If somebody has got legally, maybe they inherited it, maybe they earned it, who knows, but they've legally acquired wealth, and we say, sorry, we're going to take that away from you, and we're going to give it to somebody who might use it all on drugs, but hey, at least we're feeling pretty virtuous about it. Now, see, this isn't generous. It's generous to give your own money. It's generous to to sacrifice what is yours to help somebody else. That's generosity. To elect politicians to take money away from somebody else is to covet that person's money. And then those politicians, they give it out to people who, maybe the very same people Paul said if they don't work, they shouldn't eat. But we're going to disobey Paul. We're going to steal, and then we're going to distribute to people that Paul said shouldn't be supported. There are a lot of people suffering of poverty and stuff, but many of these are suffering because, they simply are not going to make the choices, no matter how much money you give them, the lifestyle choices, that will pull them out of their poverty. And so just pouring money down a hole when there's people who could work, who could make lifestyle changes and wouldn't be in poverty, wouldn't need to be supported. Then you could actually use your money to help people who really are poor because they're disabled or, they can't work in some way. But there's a lot of people who the only reason they're poor is they're making choices on a regular basis that they shouldn't be making. And so discipling people isn't just shoveling money on them so that they have their next meal, but is teaching them how to live a life that not only isn't a black hole consuming all kinds of goods, but actually teaching them how to live a life that's productive so they can give. Paul said in Ephesians 4, let him who stole steal no more, but let him labor with his hands so that he will have something to give others who have need. So if I'm going to disciple somebody, it doesn't mean just give them money to sponsor their self-destructive lifestyle. That's not love. If I can do something for them at all, I'm going to do what I can to help them find a way out of that situation that's caused by their own doing. Now, again, Christians have different ideas about how this is done. Lots of people feel like you just give people money and you'll feel a lot better about yourself. Well, yeah, but feeling good about yourself isn't really what the Christian life is about. It's actually loving people, doing for them what will do them good. And this is where Christians do have different ideas. Now, of course they should engage. How in the world are we going to love our neighbors or love ourselves if we're not engaging civilly with other people? We need to be doing those things that we can do that will help other people have, lives that are less dissolute and more productive and more glorifying to God. I don't have any solution to the problem with Christians fighting with each other about such things, except don't. I hate to sound like Joe Biden. I know he thinks the solution to everything is just say don't. But I would say don't fight over these things, but educate, teach, discuss. If somebody won't discuss it calmly with you, maybe they're not a learner. And there is such a thing as not casting your pearls before swine. When Jesus said that, he made it very clear. He's talking about you don't waste your time trying to invest gems of truth with somebody who has no interest whatsoever in learning it, and may resent it and turn on you for it. So, you got to use some discernment. But I honestly think a lot of people who call themselves Christians, if Jesus spoke correctly in Matthew 7, they're not really Christians at all. They think they are, but they're not interested in truth. They're not interested in righteousness. They're interested they've got their agendas, and they're tagging Jesus onto it like a postage stamp. And that's not being a Christian. Being a Christian means you're loving your neighbors, you love yourself, and that would be practical, like the Good Samaritan. He's the one who loved his neighbors, he loved himself, Jesus said. He helped a person. But helping a person, he finds a guy in a crisis, he feeds him, he dresses his wounds, he gives him a roof over his head. Now, long term, that guy wasn't living a bad life. He was just following thieves. But if he was living a bad life, it's going to keep him in poverty. Then loving him is doing something to help him change that. I'm out of time. You've been listening to The Narrow Path. My name is Steve Gregg. Our website's thenarrowpath.com.
Okay.
And a good weekend. We'll talk to you in Monday. God bless.
All right. So I didn't mean to give away the source, but there's nothing better. Nobody better. So, the good book says a lot of things. Jesus said a lot of things. One of them is, don't be like children. Don't be like children. He kind of mocked that idea. He says, this generation, this wicked generation, you're like children in the marketplace, playing, chastising their friends. Hey, we tried to play funeral and you wouldn't cry, and we tried to play wedding and you wouldn't dance. I mean, we're not supposed to be children, especially the shepherd. That word means pastor. Jehovah es mi pastor. The Lord is my shepherd. So if you're going to be a shepherd, you don't be as much a child as your congregation. That's not going to work. So Jesus said a lot of things. Here's one of them. He said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you do not what I say? So part of this message is to, air quote, Christians. The good book says you need to ask yourself whether you really are one or not. Don't just throw the name around. You got Joy Behar throwing it around on The View. She's talking about what Jesus wanted. So for you Christians, committing adultery with the church and state, with the government, education, media attainment complex that has taken over. So, Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not things that I say, and do not what I say? Somebody etched this into the wall supposedly in a cathedral in Germany. It says, you call me master and obey me not. You call me light and see me not. You call me the way and walk me not. You call me life and live me not. You call me wise and follow me not. You call me fair and love me not. You call me rich and ask me not. You call me eternal and seek me not. If I condemn you, blame me not. So, we've got to break this adultery between the church and the state. So let me try and give you why government is no good at charity. I'm going to try and go as fast as I can. What they call compassion. First of all, the founder of our country, Madison, the founder of our Constitution, said that's not the purpose of government. Well, here's a reason. Here's some of the reasons why, and how smart these guys were. What they call compassion is allowing a certain micro part of the community, of the United States, of the citizenship, to live under a blue tarp and shoot up drugs. Mom Dummy, the warmth of collectivism is in the warm mansion that he gets to be governor. He's allowing homeless to die freezing in the streets. You don't bring him into his house. He's not a good Samaritan. He's not even a Christian. He's a Muslim communist. They're always linked. Look it up. Greg Gutfeld called them hobo pops. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of sad. Their idea of compassion is letting somebody take a dump in front of your business that you scraped up, that they shut down during COVID, that you got from your parents or you built yourself. Yes, Elizabeth Pocahontas, you built it yourself. Little business, small business. So their answer to compassion is, besides virtue signaling, it actually does harm. What's the first line of the Hippocratic Oath? First, do no harm. They're actually doing harm, going into debt doing it. I took a class in college. It was an upper division, what they called cross-cultural. Well, it has kind of religious component to it. And it was called Moral Issues Today. It had a textbook and everything. And we had to do a term paper at the end of the year and a speech on a moral issue. And it had to be controversial. One of the ladies in the class, they were mostly nurses. I think they had to take it for ethics, continuing education. Anyway, she did one on poverty. And I gave her an article that I found in a newspaper called Doing Too Much for the Poor. And it pointed out how, we have the same rate of poverty as we did when the war on poverty started. We have the same exact rate of poverty as we did when the war on poverty started. Reagan said the war on poverty's over, poverty won. So wouldn't you think that anybody who wants to be efficient and careful and a good steward would look and say, how are we doing on this? Nope. I gave her this article called Doing Too Much for the Poor. And it pointed out real statistics, real facts. Like, for example, there was less crime during the Depression. So they have this idea. We'll get into that later, but I mentioned it to my dad who went through the Depression. He was the World War II generation. He said, yeah, there was nothing to steal. He was a very funny guy, very funny. Anyway, do I have to bring up the $9 billion Somali daycare scam? The local newspaper had this article where they had a kid. They'd show a kid with these shoes like you couldn't believe. What did they do? Get those from 1800 and run them through a meat grinder? And you should have seen these shoes. And it says, you'd be surprised at how many children go to school with shoes like this. Well, I was heavily involved in schools, both with my own kids, volunteering, coaching. Okay. And you'd be surprised. So I called him up. I never saw shoes anything close to that, not even in the third world. And it was the name of the paper, Shoe Fund. So you're supposed to send in money if it tugs at your heart when you see that. Oh my God, kids go to school with shoes like that? So I called that lady up, whoever's in charge of their fund there. I said, I'm ready to be surprised. I want to be surprised. How many in this town, in this county, one of the biggest in the country, how many go to school with shoes like that? Because I've just seen Air Jordans and a Nike pump or whatever it was that cost a lot of money. I've never seen a shoe like that, ever, at a school that has free breakfast, free lunch, free busing, free everything. So she kind of, actually we don't really have any numbers on it. In fact, it's just an old fund that started with that picture. They use companies that are good at fundraising. World Vision uses them. All of them use them to tug at your heartstrings. And it creates compassion fatigue, which means it destroys people's inherent desire to help. So she finally said, there really aren't any kids that go to school. So what have they been doing with this money all these years? Running the ad in their paper, maybe getting money, probably. Anybody ever look at those books? IRS wants to look at your books every year, and they consider that a write-off. So fast forward. So anyway, next week, I look in the paper and the ad's gone. So you'd be surprised. Yeah, well, I'm ready to be. Okay, so I get this other thing from a food bank. You wouldn't be surprised at how many children go to bed with hunger pangs in their stomach. How many? So I called the lady up. What a jerk. Yeah. Sorry. The truth is more important than fantasy and waste. It's actually a good deed to point out fraud, waste, and abuse so we can get that money to use for proper purposes. Anyway, at the end of the day, long story short, the lady says, well, there really aren't that many kids. I don't know if there's any that go to bed with hunger pangs every night. And so says that she said the charity fundraiser company that we use, the consultant, they do that. They do that stuff. So, Ted Kennedy, she said they have a thing called food insecurity. And, when Ted Kennedy said there's 20 million hungry children going to bed hungry every night in America, he didn't say that 20 million of them are aliens, which is a lie anyway, because they're all on Medicaid, Medicare, whatever, food aid to dependent families, whatever it's called, using their coupons. So that's a lie to begin with. But they're not American children if they're aliens. Sorry. And his definition was that, get ready for this, the definition of poverty is people who have to resort to the same meal twice in a week. And the person that wrote the article about that, exposing it, said, pass the rice-a-roni, please. I was talking to an entrepreneur who was telling me if I want to be an entrepreneur and everything, he said for the first year or two, it's going to be rice and beans and beans and rice. He was a rich guy, but he's telling the truth. So, they have this idea that poverty causes crime. That's one of their false doctrines. No crime causes poverty. Hello? I see these neighborhoods. I grew up in one. My wife did. There's nothing wrong with that neighborhood whatsoever. Nothing except crime. You could say that about any ghetto, anywhere. It's only the crime that's a problem. Anyway, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm coming home from work, and I meet this woman at a 7-Eleven. And she says, I want diapers, sir. I want diapers for my baby, or formula. So I said, okay, let's go get some. So we're walking down the aisles. Oh, the baby doesn't use any of these kind. 3 o'clock in the morning? He also needs diapers. I said, oh, okay, let's get the diapers. Oh, he doesn't wear any of these kind. I said, look, ma'am, I'm not going to just give you cash, okay? She says, God bless you, sir. Another one that I did that to spit on the window. So anyway, I got home, I asked my wife, I'm not an expert on diapers and formula, but you are. She says, yeah, at 3 in the morning, you can use any formula, any diaper. You know what she wanted. So that happens all the time. All the time. It's been exposed a million times. That's why we have compassion fatigue. You see the guy on the corner, hungry. They stopped saying we'll work for food and just said, give me something. So, I had a boss one time. He said he comes home from work after a long day and the neighbor's cleaning fish. The neighbor went fishing. He loves to fish, this my boss, but he can't. He's got to work. Why does he have to work? To pay taxes. So that this guy who went fishing, who is on welfare, spent the day fishing. Bob Newhart was an accountant before he became a comedian. Anyway, he told a story about how he got out of that business. He worked for the unemployment office, and his job was to meet with the people who came in once a week and give them a check for $35. And he took home $37, coming in 40 hours a week or more. And he said he finally just realized once on the way home, they only have to come in for an hour a week. They get the same amount of money as I get for 40 hours. And he kind of made a joke out of it, but it's not really funny. My son was at the dentist, and the Postal Service loses $15 billion with a B dollars every year. That's 120 every year. $15 billion with a B. If you break that down, it's $128,000 a minute for 1 man year in a normal 40-hour week. And so he and a couple of these older guys were talking about, they were gritching about, the Postal Service doesn't even want to forget about 99% of what they deliver is junk mail. They don't even want to quit doing it. I mean, talk about an inefficient mess. And this one lady, awful in there, she says, well, I want it. They said they don't even want to quit delivery on Saturday. She says, well, that's when I get my checks. I don't want them to quit delivery on Saturday. Yeah, sure. George Bernard Shaw said, any politician who promises to rob Peter to pay Paul can always count on the support of Paul. This is what our founders wanted to prevent. People voting for demagogues who will promise them free stuff on your money. They're destroying the middle class. Communists always do. That's their first target. FDR, when he set up welfare, the Constitution says to promote the general welfare. And he took off from that and created this communist nightmare of socialism insecurity. He said he feared that the welfare would become a narcotic. We'll talk on another show about how he set that up and Otto von Bismarck as his pattern, and it was just born to fail, bent to fail. All of that, social security. He said he feared it would become a narcotic. Well, you think? Do you think he feared it enough? Do you think he feared it enough? What does the government pay for now? The narcotics and the needles to shoot him up in with. Right in front of your business, right in front of your apartment, right in front of your condo. You got to step over fecal matter to get out because of their compassion. Not compassionate for you. And the government's terrible at charity. They say it costs $5 to give away one. Something like that. Why would you keep doing that? Do you think the private entity of the post office, any private entity could lose $15 billion a year and just keep cranking? Well, keep printing the money. We got, Ben Franklin came up with the postal service. We've got to have it. And then we had all these layers and layers and layers of NGOs. What do we find out? So they interfere. They print money to destroy the middle class, and then they just give it away to people. It's called legalized plunder. And the Democrat Party's been described as rich white people and black people now that are half white, telling you that you're poor because of rich people. Think about that. It's class warfare. It's communism. How many examples of the bad policy do you need? How many? I try to put my kid in a high school, charter high school. I'm paying for it on my taxes. And the lady gets up and speaks for it because they're going to have a lottery, and they got to be careful about the lottery because you got to do it right and fair and all that stuff. So they're treating my public high school as a lottery with the funds. And she says that grades are a socioeconomic problem. No more than that, they're economic. They're not social. That's a lie. I mean, if I want to destroy the meeting, I can get up and say, well, what about the boat people? Come here with nothing and in 1 year win the national spelling bee. You're a liar. It has nothing to do. It's a poverty. When Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, or they shall be comforted, it means humble. The poor, when they said, Judas stole the money from the collection, and then he said, hey, you could have used this for the poor. One of them, you could have used it for the poor when you're using that oil, that expensive ointment. And he said, the poor you'll have with you always. You can always do something for them. We're talking about doing things for people that aren't poor. When I worked at Children's Hospital as a volunteer for a number of years, and I'm kind of an amateur statistician. I've always have been. So I count, 50% of the beds are empty, and 50% of the ones that have somebody in them, a patient, they're illegal aliens. We already have free health care. We already had it. This was a long time before Obamacare. I go to the emergency room. Every time I've gone with my son, I've gone with myself, and I look around, I'm the only person here paying for this. Let's just be honest. I'm the only person paying. So we look around that room, doctors, nurses, ambulance, police, machinery, equipment, drugs, men. It's like Thomas Sowell, the great Thomas Sowell said, some people think that we don't have enough money for doctors, nurses, and hospitals and drugs. But we have enough money for doctors, nurses, hospitals, and drugs, and a huge organization, maybe even an NGO, to run it all. Sure, Obama, that was brilliant. So I was telling this to my how is it? What's our favorite word? Sustainable. How is it sustainable for one person to be paying, the only guy there that night, all night, and the only one paying for this? How is that even possible? So I was telling a sister about this, and she says, well, I always think there, but for the grace of God, go I. I said, well, I didn't say this, but her landscaping costs more than my house. So I said, you and your husband, write a check. Write a check to these people. You're not doing a very good job of caring about it. It doesn't even count if you just vote for somebody who'll take my money and give it when I don't want to give it for waste and fraud and abuse. You sacrifice a citizen on the altar of, I don't know what you call that. So, this separation of church and state, I saw this bumper sticker It said, I remember during Obamacare stuff, oh, a brown-skinned Middle Eastern who wants to give people free health care. That's not Obama. That's Jesus. So these people think that their definition, when Bush was running, he wanted to have faith-based initiatives. He looked at the fact that, the soup kitchen, the Salvation Army, whatever, they can do a way, way better job. But, people like Bernie Sanders, who jumped in, and Ted Kennedy, whatever, said, oh, separation of church and state, separation of church and state. He just wanted to say, hey, let's just recognize the fact that they're doing a better job. They're not spending $5 to give away one on somebody that isn't ready to be helped. So, the government ruins everything. The number one reason to come off of welfare was to get married. What did the government do about that? They ruined marriage. They made it more beneficial to not be married. Another way to come out of poverty is to be adopted. The government ruined the biggest adoption force in the country, far and away, was the Catholic Adoption League. But they said, no, you can't have separation. We got to have separation of church and state, that's a whole nother show. That's just a lie. That's an upside down understanding of that. So when you have a pastor say, "Oh, social gospel," there is no such thing. There's no such thing. So shut up about that, because there's only justice. There's no social justice. And the social justice that the good book talks about is open your mouth for the dumb. That's what I'm doing. It doesn't just mean people that can't speak. It's people that aren't allowed to speak. And dumb as in dumb and dumber. Dumb and dumber. Just like our last few candidates and our last few presidents. Have I offended you I've become your enemy by telling you the truth? This is a moment of truth. I'm sorry if we have to say it to a pastor as well as a president, but they can't commit adultery with this word and become Pharisees, phonies who want to make themselves look good. I got to get out of here. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for taking enough time to listen to this. I speak to you in truth and love. I love you. I care about you. And I want you to survive and thrive. And we can go, if I wanted to let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, I can go into all the different charity that I have done. That's where charity belongs. It belongs at home. When you cut a check of your own, that's charity. And if the government would get out of the way, we could have real nice. We could do a lot. We could fix homelessness, quote unquote, unhoused, whatever it's called this week, in no time at all. Anyway, thank you. Take care, everybody. This is Jeremiah Gunn Show, signing off. In truth, peace, justice, and love. No truth, no nothing. Thank you.